Super happy to have my friend Paul Sharp, SPG instructor Paul Sharp, SPG Illinois, to have a talk today. Thanks for getting on, Paul.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
I saw you were soliciting some questions, and Rich Bopit had some good questions that we can get into. I'm thinking when I saw that two of my favorite, you and Rich are two people are my favorite feed on Facebook. Primarily, almost everything is positive. Rich puts up his things about all the things he's grateful for.
Right.
Sometimes you put up stuff which is interesting that you put up related to issues, like you recently put up the thing about the guy from your department who was a convicted rapist getting released because of the COVID.
Yeah, rapist and murderer.
Rapist and murderer, yeah.
Yeah, check all those boxes.
Yeah. Interesting, but also like the vast majority of what you put up is stuff about staying positive and keep doing the work and don't get down and all that kind of stuff. And we've talked a lot about this before, and you've had a lot of experience helping people through that kind of stuff, and you've had a lot of your own trials to deal with.
Sure.
And so, the natural question is, do you really maintain are you positive the vast majority of the time? And if so, how are you doing it?
Yeah. So one of the best things I ever did was there's a book called The 7-Day Mental Fast or Mental Diet by Emmett Fox. It's really old. The verbiage is kind of cool because it's that old school verbiage. It's a very short book, like 40 pages or something. And the whole premise is that try to go 7 days without a negative thought. And every time that and not that you don't have a negative thought, but that you just don't dwell on it. You don't let it start that cascade and that spiral, that downhill slide. So as soon as you start to have those feelings, you check yourself. It's almost like a moving meditation, where you just observe the thought and let it go. And so I did that. I can't remember when I did it. I want to say my grandmother gave me that book when I was a kid. And so I did it. I remember being a teenager in high school, and I went through this book, and I just remember feeling better after 4 or 5 days. It was almost as if I was doing like this mental, how you feel better if you just start moving your body and that kind of, it was almost like that was happening mentally. Yeah. And I just felt better about stuff. Like nothing changed. Like I still lived in the same environment. I still lived in the same circumstances, but it just became easier for me to look for opportunities or ways to deal with it positively. Like it just was easier for me to find positive outlets and not kind of go down other pathways that were at that point in my life calling pretty strong. And so you go through the 7 days. Now the premise, it's kind of cool. It's a trick, The premise is that if you do have that moment where you fall apart and you cascade, you don't beat yourself up. You don't like, oh, I failed. You just start over. So the 7 days is just perpetual. It never ends. And so I found over a summer of trying to do this and being a kid, so I didn't really have like a lot of guidance or a lot of life experience I just knew that be positive. Don't think negative thoughts. Think about good things. Find the good, kind of like Mr. Rogers' mom, the saying where she's like, look for the helpers, that kind of thing. Like in every circumstance, find the good and focus on that. And by doing that, over a period of about 3 or 4 months, it just felt like my brain switched. Now, I don't know if there's like a scientific explanation of that. I'm sure there is. But it just felt like everything was better, even though outwardly it was not. Like outwardly, I still had to deal with, the situations that I had to deal with in my world at that time. But internally, I just kept thinking about, like, oh, that's really, like really cool that, this person gave me the opportunity to shovel their barn. You know what I mean? I'm going to make some money and then I can put some gas in my car, different things like that. It shifted how I looked at things, if that makes sense. And so I think really at that point in my life, it was important that I got on that trajectory because it's kind of held me over through a lot of other stuff that was negative, a lot of other stuff that, I don't know, man, maybe I would have gone down a bad path, and not to say that I haven't, had have my moments of what the hell, but it definitely kept me from getting into a place where I was over my head for sure, like
Sounds
even,
like mindfulness, basically. You're in
yeah,
your own thoughts are.
yeah, it really is. It reminds me a lot of like the books by Thich Nhat and different guys like that, where they talk about meditation as being very simple. Like you can have a mala, like you can have your beads to count your breaths with or whatever, and I've heard you talk about it before, just breathe in, breathe out,
Mhm.
and try not to think about anything else. And if a thought comes through, I think you did something about that at one of the camps, right? Where you talked about like breathe in, breathe out. If a thought comes through, don't hang on to it. Just immediately bring your attention back to your next breath in and out, and how that carries over to being in bad positions in jiu-jitsu, but that also carries over to being in bad positions elsewhere. Like, I mean, imagine being in an accident or being in a situation where some outside force is trying to hurt you really bad. The last thing you need to do is start thinking macro and start thinking like, what else? You need to just in and out, man. Breathe in and out. That's what's keeping you alive. And then you can start to process a way out.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like we've talked before, you get that cascade of just, it's like an avalanche, a mental avalanche that just nothing makes sense and you're frozen.
Yeah. Yeah. You talked about this before too, and I found it super helpful. But you were talking about just measuring. Not even measuring is not the right word, but being aware of the downtime. It's not that you're going to fall down or make a mistake or get depressed. It's the amount of time it takes before you just get back on it. And the point is just to get back on it and to shorten that amount of time when you're in that bad headspace, which is, again, I think just another aspect of mindfulness. But I found that super helpful for
Yeah,
people.
for sure. And I think about that, like, and we've talked before, like most of my life was spent not drinking, not doing anything, kind of like a kid, but without the judgment, and, and there was a short period of time where I did drink pretty heavily, just because life, and in that time and during that, I, it that was really the key, I think, to me not getting into a bad or worse space, because that kind of thing is so prevalent in law enforcement and in that world, um, that it just becomes like this kind of this siren call, like, hey, let's go to choir practice. We had a bad night, we saw some terrible things. Let's go to choir practice, and then before you know it, choir practice is every shift. You're going to the bar, and then first off, God knows how you get home, which is a horrible thought, but then also, it's just your body and all the negatives that come with that. And so being able to pull myself out of that right when it started to get where I just remember one time thinking it took me like 3 days to recover from a bender, like, we've all been there, and no judgment on the people that are still doing it, but it took me like 3 days. But the thing was, in the middle of that, I missed time with my kids.
Yeah.
I was supposed to have my kids, and I was so tore off that I couldn't be there, and I just was like a mess. And so for me, thankfully, that was my wake up call, and kind of brought me back to that, that thought that you said, like, okay, I messed up, but how long do I stay down? Like, how long do I stay here in this mess? Or do I pick myself up and immediately start making changes to make up for this? Like, I can't get that time back, but I can make that the future times won't be affected in this way, And so that's the thing. Like, it really is, how fast do you pick yourself up? Like,
Yeah.
how fast, like the mindfulness, right? Like, how fast do you let go of that thought? How fast do you abandon the baggage, the negative of whatever experience that you've had, and get moving forward, and get yourself moving towards, because action begets action, right? So you start taking action, you start doing the next thing, and then you get that momentum built. And then next thing you know, you're on a roll. Like, you're making good progress towards something better. Or I could just sit there and be miserable.
Yeah.
You know?
I think sometimes too, for whatever reason, a lot of people make meditation and mindfulness way more complicated than it needs to be. Because I mean, I think your explanation just now is something everybody can understand, and I think that that's really the crux of the whole thing. Fortunately, now though, there's a lot of good material out there, like Sam Harris's app. I find really useful for meditation. But for somebody who hasn't done it, they can get it. I think he's been giving it away for free on during the COVID thing. But it has a program on there, and it's super easy. So there's really no reason why anybody can't give it a shot. But
Yeah.
it definitely makes a huge difference.
Do you do it every day?
I try to do it every day.
Yeah, yeah.
I said I every day. But it is it's super simple, and I definitely feel better. It's like when there's been periods in my life where I've lifted weights consistently,
Yeah.
and periods in my life where I stopped lifting, and
Which is good. You don't need to lift weights. Stop lifting weights.
I've never lifted like heavy weight the way Travis does or anything like that, but I've just lifted basically to feel better and so that I can roll. My whole point is I just want to be able to keep rolling and not get injured.
Yeah, injury prevention.
Yeah. And the difference between how good I feel, how well my body feels when I'm just doing the light bit of weightlifting that I do compared to when I'm not is night and day. So why would I ever take a break? But I think it's just a question of what you said is really it's about habits. And as soon as you get out of it, then it's easy not to get back into it.
Yeah. And you travel a lot too. So that screws it up. I know when I was traveling a lot, I'd be like, oh, cool. I'm going to find a CrossFit gym because they're pretty cool about letting you drop in and just do your own thing.
Yeah.
And, I'm like, oh, I find a CrossFit. I can't find a CrossFit. So I'll go down to the hotel gym, and the hotel gym is like something from the 70s. Like I got to go get my leg warmers on and it's hard. Yeah. Yeah. It's just like 20-pound dumbbells and a yoga mat, So yeah, it's easy to get out of that habit. But yeah, now are you cool with talking about what you went through?
Yeah.
All right. So did you do any kind of meditation coming out of your brain injury or your stroke? Did you do anything like?
Yeah, I did. Fortunately, I think I got off really light with my stroke.
Yeah.
I've never really noticed. I had some complications shortly after, like immediately after the stroke, that lasted a couple weeks, as far as like half my body being kind of numb and dragging my foot and that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, it went away right away. And my doctor's explanation was, because you can see the spot in your brain that had died, circle in the brain where those cells had died. And what he said was the other parts of the brain just take up the slack basically, and the brain rewires itself. So I haven't really, they're probably, maybe my wife's noticed or something, but I haven't personally noticed. And unless I get tired. And then when I get tired, what happens is that part of the brain, I guess there's less of it. So symptoms come back. But as far as the drinking, I mean, it's not a big secret that I spent a couple decades drinking. And on the rare occasion that I've tried to do that since I stopped drinking, man, I can't even begin to describe how bad my body feels. Not just for one day or 2 days, but for like a week. And it's just, and then I think, why would I ever want to go back to that? It's just,
it takes about a week, right? Yeah. And and for me, I don't know if it's mental because there's like a negative connotation or a negative association with that for me, but I just feel down. I just struggle, and every morning I wake up, and I've had this ritual for I don't know how long, but every morning, I think actually goes back to Sunday school. So I had a Methodist Sunday school teacher that told us every day to wake up and write 3 things we're thankful for down on a piece of paper. And at the end of the month, if we brought that in, we would win like this thing, like some prize. There was always a prize, And so I was diligent. Like I'm going to win that thing, like I was a poor kid, I didn't have toys and all that stuff. So I was like, you're going to give me a Tonka toy truck if I just write down 3 things every day that I'm thankful for? I got you. Like I'll write them all down on one day, but I'm still going to write them down, And so I think that's where that habit started, but every day it just automatic. I'll like open my eyes and just think about like, okay, there's three things, that I'm thankful for right now. And and then I do it again before I fall. I try to do it again before I fall asleep. Just like, what are the three things that today that I'm just thankful happened to me, or to one of my friends, and and so, but when I when I would drink and that kind of stuff, I fell out of that. Like
Yeah.
I did not do that. It just, I don't know if it's just my brain is like, hey, you're being a screw up right now, so you might as well just drop all your good habits and just go fully to hell. But yeah, I got out of that, man. And so that's what I noticed too with that kind of stuff is it, and nothing again, like I enjoy seeing my friends have fun,
Yeah.
like we've talked before, like I don't eat meat, but I like seeing my friends have a good meal. Like if they want a steak or whatever, like cool, man. Let's have fun and let's enjoy our conversation. And it's the same thing with drinking. Like I'm not going to judge on anybody or harsh on anybody that's drinking. I just know for me, it's a 100% negative experience.
Yeah.
And especially after the brain injury, man, it was a yeah, it was really even like so I would do like a social drink, like once a year kind of thing, holidays or whatever. Uh, Even after the brain thing, just like one little drink, I noticed like, whoa, like I'm not, you know, I mean, I'm a lightweight, but not that light, and I just noticed that, I would feel sick. And so I think, some of the chemistry in my head got screwed up a little bit, I think. So,
Sure.
it took me away from the positive. That's pretty
Yeah.
much the easiest way to say it.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that's cool. I'm glad you never. I knew you recovered fast. I'm glad you don't have any long term stuff, man. That's
I still have a never-ending tingling in my right hand and arm.
yeah,
Basically, feels like when your arm goes to sleep.
yeah,
At first, it bothered me, and they gave me some powerful nerve-killing painkiller.
yeah,
But the problem when you take that is then everything slows down. Your ability to respond to just life in general slows down.
yeah.
And the reality is, I don't even notice it anymore.
Right.
Right? It's a terrible
Yeah,
time, so I'm not even paying any attention to it.
yeah. That's how I am with my right foot. My toes, the top of my toes, or feel like they're on fire sometimes, just from some of the nerve damage that's left over. And but I don't really notice it, unless like something weird, like or if here's what I notice is if I make the mistake of, hey, I haven't felt that in a couple days.
Right.
Yeah. And it's like, oh no, it's still there. You just you just zoned it out. So
Well, here's something I was going to talk to you about.
yeah,
Unfortunately, we'd be veering away from positive stuff, but I've been asked a lot about the Arbery shooting. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correct, but I think that's how
sure.
you pronounce it. And you and I talked about it right after it happened, but what what are your thoughts on that particular shooting?
Yeah. First, I think it's a tragedy that was completely avoidable.
Mhm.
That's the first thing I think. I think if even as an active duty police officer, when if I would see stuff happening when I was out and about, I would not intervene unless it was like physical harm being done to somebody,
You're not
which I
talking
think,
about somebody being hurt, but you're talking about like a property crime or something.
yeah, property crime, even two people arguing, or whatever. Like, I'm not getting involved in that. It might just play itself out. That might be their relationship.
Mhm.
Um, there's 100 different ways that can go. None of it's going to go good if I interject myself as an outside party with no authority. I
Mhm.
don't have any color of law off duty. I mean, technically, yeah, but it's not going to be recognizable.
Mhm.
I can't, like, we're not going to go into court and they're going to say, how did you identify yourself as a police officer? Or how did they know that you were a police officer? So I just don't want to get into that situation. So, it's best just to, if you feel like it's getting to that point, call the police, call 911 and get somebody out there to handle it that's got all the tools necessary to handle it. If I'm running around on my own time, I'll have typical stuff on me. I'll have like my normal stuff, but I don't have a radio. I don't have
Right.
communications. I don't have any of that kind of stuff. I'm solo. I don't have body armor. There's nothing on me that's really prepared for a proactive fight. I'm completely defensive when I'm
Mhm.
out and about. So, um, with that being said, when they saw him doing whatever it was, and I kind of, it's I posted some stuff the other day on Facebook, and one of my friends was talking about having two loud, opinionated, completely contradictory voices going inside my head all the time. And so I jokingly back, I feel like my head, sometimes the inside of my head is like British Parliament, where they're just yelling back and forth and the right general, it's so from the other side of it, I've been on runs before. I've been out, 'cause I like to trail run, and I've been on runs before, and I'll see like new construction, and I'll go up and look at it.
Mhm.
Like, or I'll see a house being rehabbed if I'm running through town or whatever, and there's no doors or windows or anything. I'll go up and look at it because I think it's cool.
I walk through those properties sometimes just to check them out.
Yeah, I think it's cool. Yeah, yeah. Like, hey, man, this is cool stuff. And I used to do construction, so there's some of that too, where I'm fascinated by the ability to put stuff together, and so I'll go through. So from that side of it, what did he actually do wrong
Right.
that would cause me as an off-duty copper to say, hey, dude, hold up for what? You know
Mhm.
what I mean? Like some random guy just told me to stop.
Mhm.
Why? I don't
Mhm.
see any markings on him. I don't see any identification. It's not a squad car, you
Mhm.
know, and I'm getting out of here.
Mhm.
And then if they start pursuing me, man, what am I going to do now? You
Mhm.
know, um, from that side of it. And, you know, I don't know if he called, if the gentleman who was killed, I don't know if he called anybody. I don't know if he got on his cell phone and said, hey,
I don't even know if he had a phone.
yeah, that's the thing. Like sometimes I run without my phone, um, which every single time has been a mistake. I Murphy's law. If I go for a run without my phone, somebody's dog will get loose and chase me, or or something crazy will happen. But yeah, that's so. I don't know if he had a phone on him, but I just don't see. So right from the start, we have to our knowledge, no legal justification to stop this guy.
Mhm.
There's no reason to try to, hem him in and tell him he can't move or he can't leave and try to hold him. And that's the other thing too. I don't carry handcuffs on me. I don't carry when I'm off duty and just walking around. I mean, I might have a pistol on me, and I've always got a pocket knife because I grew up in the country, so it's just everybody has a pocket knife on them. I've always got some sort of pocket knife on me, and more frequently now, I actually have medical gear on me because I've used that more often than anything to help people when I'm off duty. But um, what am I? How am I going to restrain this guy? What were they? How are they going to restrain him?
Right.
And on what grounds? Again, we are temporarily suspending somebody's civil rights, so to speak. Like I'm temporarily suspending your right to move freely when
Mhm.
I place you under arrest, when I detain you or whatever it is. So you better be right
Mhm.
in that when you make that decision. It's not something you do lightly. And so stopping this guy was completely, I think, wrong. And then when it got into the shooting part of it, that's where it kind of gets. Now we have kind of like this fight over a gun. Some sides are going to argue, well, if I'm fighting over a gun, I'm fighting for my life because if he takes it away from me, he might kill me with it.
Right.
And that's a legit argument. But the other side of that is you never would have been in that fight if you had not taken the actions you've taken.
Right.
So, you know what I mean? It's kind of like when police officers get in trouble for the suicide by cop stuff, where say you have a guy, and I've had this before, we had a guy barricaded in a bathroom, threatening to harm himself, all this good stuff. Uh, the door was shut, confer with family. Hey, is there anybody in there? No. Is there any way for him to get out of there? No. Is there anything in there for him to harm himself? We don't know. We don't know if he took something in there with him, but there's just normal bathroom stuff in there. Cool. I'll wait.
Mhm.
Like if I open that door and he's armed with something and I have to kill that man, was that necessary? Probably not,
Right.
because he's not going to hurt anybody in there. He's by himself.
Right.
So it's the same thing with this guy. If they force the issue and then there's a killing, I don't see how it's going to be justified. I really don't. I don't see how, like I said, they can make the argument of fighting over the gun, but that argument gets thrown out because you shouldn't have been there to begin with.
Mhm.
Maybe I'm wrong. I don't see how it's going to fly. It's a tragedy, man. And people need to really think about that kind of stuff. And we've talked many times about that. Like, I'm down with the right to defend yourself. Like, your right to life is your primary right. All other rights support that. And
Mhm.
so that means you have the right to arm yourself if you feel necessary, right? Now, but at the same time, know responsibilities that come with that. Know what that entails.
Mhm.
Know what it's like, or don't know what it's like, but think about what it's going to be like to have somebody looking through your sights at somebody and
Mhm.
realizing like their next move dictates whether I press the trigger or not. And that's serious business. And it's not like a western or a cool movie or something. Like, it just doesn't go that way. You
Right.
know, the shooting is just the beginning, you
Right.
know, because now that jury and all these expert witnesses have months to dissect everything you did, you know, every millisecond. And yes, as much as the judge might direct them to only consider what you knew in that moment, they're still going to hear.
Right.
Right? They're still going to hear the other side of the table saying whatever they can say to create the picture they need to create of you being guilty.
Right.
And so it's serious business, man. And in this situation, my opinion is it's a needless death. It really is. I don't know anything about this young man. I don't, other than his age, and that he was, the circumstances leading to the shooting. But it really seems like it was avoidable.
Mhm.
And man, I don't know. It's going to be a mess. That's for
Mhm.
sure. Because I don't think anybody's going to be happy.
No. And so a couple things. The shooters, of course, their story is that this guy, the young man that was shot, was burglarizing the neighborhood.
Right.
But all it goes straight back to, well, then you should call the police,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Um, but what happens is then you'll have some people in the media that are then going to go and they're going to start to look and see, does he have a record?
Right.
Uh, is there video footage of him breaking into a property or committing property crimes in the neighborhood, that kind of thing?
Sure.
And that even that search makes a lot of people angry because they're upset at the tragedy. And what do you feel about that? Do you think that that's even relevant? That they should even be looking into that?
I I don't think it's relevant because all that's going to matter is what those two guys knew.
Mhm. At the
So they're going to look at what those two guys knew. The guys that engaged with him, they're going to look at what they knew.
right,
And so that's what's going to, of course, the media is going to dig it up, and attorneys are going to dig it up too. But it's not going to be really relevant. The main thing that's going to matter is what did you know at that time,
right,
and your decisions are based on what you knew at that time, not what you found out later. Um, and that seems to be some of the discussion too. Is was he a suspect? Was he, you know what I mean? Like, that there's so many what ifs out there, and again, it's just unfortunate. To me, it just seems like it just was completely avoidable.
yeah, oh, for sure. That
You know, I mean, at this point in my life, I I think the only time I would intervene would be imminent threat to life, right? So kind of the IDOL, the acronym IDOL, imminent defense of life, and medical stuff.
yeah,
I mean, I've done more medical stuff off duty than anything else. I mean, remember that time we were in a restaurant in Portland and that accident happened?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the kind of stuff, man. It just, I end up getting involved in more of that stuff than the other stuff. And so I just feel like there's going to come a time where they're going to have to set some sort of standard for off-duty stuff or whatever it might be. And incidents like this, I think, are going to impact that in a negative way.
Yeah. And maybe some rulings on citizens arrests.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. There's going to be some, and I don't know if are they trying to invoke the stand your ground type stuff too. I saw a couple little news blurbs about that, but you never know because sometimes the media will just grab like a clickbait almost title, and type thing. So there was some argument about that too. So again, that's what I mean. Like if they're fighting over the gun, yeah, he gets the gun away from me. He could kill me with my own gun, but that all kind of falls apart because I never should have been there to begin with.
Mhm.
So that's where it's going to get screwy.
So you mentioned before the media,
Hmm.
and one of the problems that I think and it seems to only become a bigger problem every year that goes by, is there's a large percentage of population that has a deep rooted distrust of the mainstream media.
Sure.
And the media has their narrative that they run with. And there are people that immediately will use a shooting like this to say, well, it's proof that America's a racist nation. And then there's other people who will immediately become defensive and distrustful of the media and the narrative. Um, and then there's this conflict that goes back, and it's really kind of a political conflict. Basically, the lines are drawn mostly right and left.
Yeah.
But you worked for a long time as a police officer, retired police officer. What would you say to somebody who did not understand why lots of people, and in particular, and correct me if I'm wrong, a good percentage of police officers have a deep-rooted distrust of the mainstream media?
Yeah. So I think it kind of goes back to the 24-hour news cycle where they had to create the news rather than report the news. And it just kind of grew out of that. So one of my first experiences with a reporter was on an accident scene. It was a rollover accident. And I was really new. I was actually on my FTO. And this reporter came up and he had his camera and he's trying to film the accident scene. And my FTO told me, "Hey, get him out of here. Like, don't let that guy in here." You know, and because it was pretty bad. So I said, "Yeah, okay, cool." So I moved the guy back, tell him like, "Hey, you can't film this young girl they're trying to extract from this car. Like she might not make it, her family." And I'm talking like a regular person because I'm brand new. I don't know, And I'm like, "Listen, man, this let's just be considerate of the family. We don't know what's going to happen with this girl and all that." And he looks me dead in the face and goes, "Get out of the way of my shot." And I said, "I'm not getting out. No, you can't. You can't film here. You have to move." You know. So I move him back. He's not happy about it. I move him back beyond the designated area, and we're still on scenes like that. It's rapidly evolving. Fire equipment's coming in, all this stuff, and so we're still trying to set up a perimeter where the firefighters can work safely, all that stuff, manage traffic, everything. We don't want people driving through, the accident scene and all that. And so I move him back, and he says, "Are you going to tell me what happened here?" He goes, "Fine, fine, fine." Moving back. He goes, "You going to tell me what happened out there?" And I go, "No, no, I can't." And by now, there's more reporters starting to show up. And I said, "No, I can't. I can't tell you what happened out there." And mind you, like I'm a peon at this point. Like most of these guys don't even know my name. I'm just new guy. So they're like, "Hey, new guy, keep the press over there. Keep them away." And so I'm talking to this guy, and he looks me square on, and he says, "Listen, you can tell me what happened, or I'm going to film this, with you in the shot saying an unnamed source at the police department told us blah, blah, blah. And so kind of it was like the strong arm tactic to get me to either tell him what's going on or he's just going to make it up and then they can do a retraction later. And that was my introduction to that side of it. Now, and I'm sure that's not all of them, right? Because, well, at least I hope not. That can't be the majority of them. But from that point on, I really began to just distrust them. It just was like, how can you get the story so wrong? And why? And then I started to see that a lot of times it was just to be divisive. It was just to be divisive. And even like in my situation, when my whole thing went down, I don't know if you ever read the articles that were going around the internet. I hate to mention it because then people Google it, and then my good Google ratings go down, but but even in that, they never talked to me. They never
Right.
contacted my attorney. They just ran with the story. And then they get to the end of the story. So they go through this whole thing and they get to the end of the story. And it's like 4 lines that say, no charges were brought. The Kane County State's Attorney's Office refused to authorize charges because there was no basis for charges. And we're done. He got in trouble for administrative errors. We're done. There was no criminal act, and but that's not the headline. And that's not like the first however many paragraphs. That's the very last paragraph. And without ever even talking to me, without ever having a like never sitting down with me and saying, hey, what happened? Or my attorney, So when you see stuff like that, where they just take one side and run with it. And next thing I know, it's all over the country. So it's one of those things where you look at it and you go, that's all it takes for these guys to ruin somebody's life if they get a chance or try to, you know,
Right.
without conscience, and also without even trying to get both sides of the story. Like they didn't do their due diligence, you
Right.
know, and so things like that just cause folks like me and a lot of other people to look at the media and go, you guys are hacks.
Mhm.
You're not actually trying to find out what the story is. You just want a headline that will sell, get clicks or views or whatever, and keep narrating to your fan base what you want them to take in and digest. And then
Right.
that's it. It's not a search for the truth. I think
Right.
that's the issue.
Right.
It's just not a search for the truth. And that's bad for everybody, because then that opens the door for these other guys to say, hey, we've got the truth, as crazy as it might sound, and then you've got people that are freaking out about 5G and all this other stuff, and they completely forget Occam's razor. Like that's probably not the explanation for that, like
It's actually lizard people that are aliens.
Nephilim,
No,
Nephilim.
definitely. You have so much more real world experience than I do with that. But I did for a couple years spend a lot of time looking at a lot of that data and a lot of the shootings for stuff that I was writing. And then that's when it dawned on me that the actual mainstream media narrative is not just wrong. It's almost backwards. And my experience was looking at the reporting, it was wrong pretty much every single time.
Yeah.
And so for people that don't know, you work in a rough neighborhood where there was a high crime neighborhood, right?
Mhm.
And for a long time, you were a community police officer, so you lived there with your family in that same neighborhood.
Yeah. I
That
lived there.
saw lots of shootings.
Right.
And how often did they get the story right?
Pretty much never. Pretty much never. They just there's really no interest in getting it right, and that's disappointing, because you have this platform where you could do something good. You have this platform where you could bring about change. You have literally people listening to you simply because the position that they hold,
Mhm.
and they do what with it? It's it, There's so many analogies we could use, right? Like it's like having this ability to just compose incredibly complex and intricate and moving pieces of music, and instead you're like, hey man, I'm just gonna play well, your favorite, I'm just gonna play some rap. you know you know but not only, but not really, but you know what I'm saying. It's just, I could do all that, or I could just play like some chopsticks, just two notes over and over repetitively. And 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 but why? That's what I always come back to. Why?
That's what
Why
I
would you do that?
why why do you think that happens? I mean, obviously there's the clickbait, but even if it was just all about clickbait and ratings, you can get ratings different ways. You could get ratings lying about the story from the other perspective,
Right.
but they almost always have a very similar narrative that they're all following. Is it because they're lazy? Is it because they're ideological? What do you think?
I think there's two, both of those reasons, I think. And then also I think that there's when you have what oh man, a buddy of mine put it. We were talking about um spiritual leaders. When you have a broken person in a position of leadership in a or an environment that's heavily weighted towards enlightenment, like the spiritual and that kind of thing, it's so easy to go over into toxicity. So easy for that brokenness to then break other people. And so I think sometimes you have some of that going on, where you have maybe some dysfunctional people, some folks that are just kind of broken, they haven't dealt with their issues, and then now they're in a position where people are listening to them, and that brokenness comes through, that kind of that toxic, like the world's a terrible place, comes out of them, through this channel that they have to just dump this on people. There's also the human almost predilection towards negativity,
Yeah,
where people want to see the traffic accident, like they want to see how bad it is. And it's like, why would you want to see that? You're never going to be able to unsee it, man.
right.
you know and then the other thing that I think too is, if we think about any relationship, like a family dynamic, and I had a friend that's a counselor, and she explained this to me years ago, and suddenly a lot of things clicked for me. But when you have a person, you constantly have a strife in your family or any relationship, a gym, whatever it might be, business. You constantly have this strife, right? And you just can't figure it out. Like, why are we always fighting? Why is every family gathering turns into a fight? There's always drama. There's always a screaming match. Like, why is there always drama in the business, or whatever the organization might be? And she said, you have to find the person. There's one person who is usually the source of all the contention. That person is also the person who's letting everybody else know what's going on. Like, hey, I just want you to know so and so said this. I just want you to know. And so that person, and what that does for that person is makes them the center of attention, because they're the person you go to find out what was said,
Right.
what was done. And so every time there's a gathering of everybody, they know they're going to be the center of attention in some way, because everybody wants to know what was said, and they're the person to go to. And they could use that for good, but usually it's a broken person.
Mhm.
Usually it's a person that's toxic, and they trend towards the negative. And in a lot of ways, I think the media is that kid, right? Like, media is that person in our relationship as a whole, as a society, where they just keep this negativity spinning, because it keeps us glued to the screen to see what's next, to see what's going on. Like, oh, there's all of this racial tension, there's this or there's that. you know, Before COVID, I could go to my coffee shop and have a conversation with four or five different people from different backgrounds, and I never saw hatred or tension. Yeah, yeah, the world's not a perfect place, but when we get away from the screen, we get away from their feed, we kind of like my friend the counselor told me, like, you have to find a way to exclude them from the conversation. You have to find a way to go to the people that feel like you have wronged them, according to this person, and talk to them face to face and say, listen, like, let's leave him or her completely out of this. What are our issues? Like, do we even have an issue if we leave everything that they've said out?
Mhm.
Right. And it's just suddenly all of a sudden, it's like the clouds part, and we have a double rainbow and all that good stuff. But it's just like that kind of stuff. I think like when we find a way to kind of parse that toxic child or that toxic person out of the conversation, which would be the media, who needs our attention.
Mhm.
Without us, they don't exist.
Mhm.
There's no 24-hour news cycle if we're not watching. And so they need us. So how do they get us? Negativity. It's so much easier. Like if it bleeds, it leads, right? If I have something negative to say, if I can give you information about whomever it is, this is what they think about you and your group, got you split. Like I've got you divided now, and I'm the source of information. You got to come to me. So I think that's where something went wrong. My opinion, just that's where something went wrong. I don't know how to fix it other than like that. Like we as a society have to decide, I'm not going to allow Fox, CNN, MSNBC, whatever it might be, I'm not going to allow them to decide or determine how I look at my neighbors, how I look at the guy standing next to me in line or whatever it is. It's just, I'm not going to do it anymore. And then once we unplug from them, I think it would it would decrease. First off, it would decrease their control and their hold
Mhm.
over us. Also, it would shut down their ability to dictate the conversation. They need that division, man. They need us angry. Like they need us fighting with each other. Without that, we don't need them.
Right.
You know.
That's super interesting. I have more questions about that, but I don't want to step on that. I think that's a good. Um, we'll talk about the other stuff another time.
Okay.
So, Rich asked a good question. So he was talking about practical self-defense, which again you have a lot of experience with, not just as a police officer, but teaching it.
Mhm.
And if I understand his question correctly, he's talking about, I'm not sure if he means before or after, but how you deal with people, regular people who don't have a lot of experience with maybe violent conflict, the emotional impact that has on them having to defend themselves. I think he means both. So someone who maybe would otherwise hesitate to defend themselves and gets put into a situation where maybe they don't even think they're capable of it. How
Right.
would you talk to them? And I think he's also talking about how would you talk to somebody that had to do it post fact and maybe had a little guilt about it.
Yeah. So that's a good question, and you see some really visceral reactions from people. If you ever see violence out and about, like a fight in a public area or something like that, like I don't really watch the people that are fighting because they don't know how to fight, so it's boring. But I'll watch the people around. Like if people are getting into an argument, they're yelling and shouting at each other. If you watch the people around, there's some really strange reactions from people, and you can tell who's not been exposed to violence before or never considered, played the what if game. And that's interesting from a coach's perspective for us. How do we get people like that to understand they have to go? Like, you've got to start fighting.
What is it that tells you when you're watching a crowd that they haven't experienced it before?
Sometimes you'll see people start crying. You'll see like women, sometimes younger girls, and you'll see them. They just start crying. They just freak out. They have nothing to do with the situation. It's just so abnormal and
Mhm.
so frightening to them to see violence. Um, you'll see guys who are just you'll see them kind of cringing, almost subconsciously, like like that flinching type thing. You'll see that kind of stuff where guys just it's one of those things where they just haven't been exposed to it, and to see it, it just freaks them out, for lack of a better term. And it's interesting to watch. It in the beginning stages. Once if it continues, then they'll kind of get past it. But it's just in that initial like, holy cow, these guys are going to kill each other moment type thing. So I always come back to in prepping people for those moments. You have to think about what you're fighting for rather than what you're fighting against. So my determination is always to continue to live my life. I've got a good life. I'm thankful for everything I have. My life is very beautiful. It's amazing sometimes. I had some. There's a joke. Somebody said to me, "So I had an opportunity recently to get some stuff from a gun manufacturer," and a guy said, "Oh, it must be nice." And I'm like, "Kind of is," like, you know. But it's one of those things where, you know, I think about that kind of stuff. Like, I don't want anybody to take me from that. I don't want anybody or anything to take me from that, because violence isn't always another person. Violence could be a car. It could
Right.
be a car crash. It could be something just insane happens, and not insane, but just something you never thought of that happens to you, and now you've got to deal with it.
Mhm.
And so that kind of stuff, I think about in those moments that I'm going to live because I love my life. I don't care what it is in front of me. I don't have time to hate them. I don't have time to get mad or rage or anything like that. But you're not taking me from all the things that I love.
Mhm.
Period. And so that usually connects a little better for folks, especially people that come from a background where they don't have that well of negative experiences. You know, you see one place you'll see these guys, like in the ultra marathon guys, guys that do triathlons and stuff. A lot of times, when I'm training with those guys or training around those guys, I'll I'll talk to a lot of guys that or gals that have um, dependency things that they overcame, like drug addiction, alcohol addiction, sexual abuse, physical abuse, all that kind of stuff. And they're coming, so they dig into this well of just anger, to just to suffer, to get through. Because you know, I'm not planning on running 50 miles unless somebody's chasing me. And but they're gonna run this 50 miles. They dig deep into this well of just hatred and hurt, and just that motivates them and drives them. But for the most part, a lot of people don't have that. And so trying to get somebody like, you got to get mad, you got to rage, like they don't have those experiences. They don't have that to to tap into. And the other side of that is, you might not want them to tap into that in a training environment, because I'm not a counselor, and I'm not a mental health professional. If we do tap into something and open Pandora's box, I can't help them. I
Mhm.
just created a problem for them that I can't help. And so I stay away from that side of it and focus completely on what they love. And that comes from one of my friends that does Ironmans, where we talked about it. And I said, "Hey, Steve, like, all these guys are just mad." Like, I did not expect this, And he goes, "Yeah, man, it's like that. But I just focus on that, how much I love doing this, and how much it's just amazing that I started out with asthma and sick, and now I can bike 70 miles and swim a couple miles and run a marathon all in one day." And like, how awesome is that? And I thought, that's a much better approach, you
Yeah.
know? And and that kind of altered how I approached self-defense with people, because I kind of was in the middle on that. Like, maybe we need to find a way to get these people mad because they're so timid and so, you know, laid back, and just lack exposure to violence. But then I realized, like, what if I tap into, listen, you know, do you like your life? Do you like being able to see your children or your grandchildren? Do you like being able to visit with them, and all the things that you do? Do you like that? Do you love that? Well, this person is going to take that from you.
Mhm.
You've got to fight. You have got to fight, you know? And so and then you can kind of, after doing that, then you can slowly kind of ease them into the, if you don't fight, they're going to get past you and get to all that you love. You're the line in the sand. You have got to stop them. They've got to stop here, And so that was that's kind of how I do it. And that's worked pretty well for most of my trainees. That really works well. And then for the post stuff, I try to get them to, kind of almost back to like that Byron Katie kind of work thing. Like, is this true? How do you know it's true? It's almost kind of like those questions where they start to have these negative thoughts. Like, man, I can't believe, like, I didn't want to hurt anybody. Like, maybe I shouldn't have, and you will have people, and I know you have, you have people that say, maybe I shouldn't have hurt them that bad, or maybe like I shouldn't have gone that far, or maybe they wouldn't have if I just, maybe by me fighting back, it caused it to happen. And you just have to like get through to them. How do you know that's true? Is that true? Like, listen, this person has a history of this. If it's a domestic situation or something like that, like they've done this to you before. Like, you have a history with them doing this. So we know that's not true. So you go through kind of those questions and answers with them where you get them to just kind of answer it for themselves, because they're not going to hear an outside voice. All you can do is guide them. You can't tell them. You just have to guide them into seeing for themselves that what I did in that moment, based on what I knew, was the best thing for me to do. There's 1,000 other ways I could have done it, but right now, in that moment, I did the best that I knew to do. And so once you get them to understand that, then later we can kind of gently begin a more heavy duty debriefing kind of with them, where we go back into, okay, well, at this moment, maybe you could have done this and altered the outcome at this moment. But you can't do that when they're still in that state where they're like second guessing themselves. Yeah. You got to get them past that and then get it into, what can we learn from this? And I try to frame it in, I don't need to learn, you don't need to learn this because you've been through it. But how do I better relay this to others?
Right.
Like if you had to tell someone else.
So you're not laying some guilt on them.
Yeah, for sure. I don't want to do all that work to get the guilt off of them, only to come back and hit them with it, So I want to get them to that place where they can go, okay, well, how would I tell somebody in the future? What are some options? What are some better ways, better things to do? And there's always better ways to do it. And then once you get them in that mind frame where they're looking at it from that perspective, like, hey, how do I pass along these lessons? Because and I tell them, listen, statistically, there's not that many people that are going to experience whatever they experienced, if they experienced violence to that degree where it went physical. So your data point is important, and we need to take the lessons from your data point so that we can pass it on to others, because we don't have enough of this information. And usually you'll see them click, like they get it, like, boom, I am the vessel of knowledge, and they just sort of like, I can help others. And then that's how I kind of ease them into that, where they have that moment of, oh yeah, okay, so if I were to tell someone else how to do this, this is what I tell them to do.
Yeah.
And then that alleviates the guilt, because they shouldn't feel guilty for defending themselves,
right?
Ever. But I'm telling you, man, good people have a hard time with hurting other people.
Sure.
They really do. Now I'm seeing, I know you've seen it, for sure. There's good people out there, not us, but there's good people out there that really have a hard time with like the thought of punching somebody, or the thought of. I had a lady, super nice lady, good at jiu-jitsu, really good at jiu-jitsu. Her first time choking someone out in training, during like a positional sparring session, her first time slapping a choke on somebody and having them tap caused her to walk off the mat and cry, because it so upset her that she hurt them that much that they had to tap out. And I remember thinking, and this was when we had moved away from being strictly all athletes and, the meathead gym environment. And so we had more normal people training with us. And that was the first time I'd seen that. That was the first time I'd been in an environment where somebody really gets upset about thinking they hurt somebody. And so, we had to have that conversation. And now, man, she'll choke you no matter what, she'll kill you. But at that time, so there are people like that. And if they're not in the environment where they're training with us every day and they get habituated to kind of the bump and grind and the low level violence that we experience on the mat, if they're just coming in for a one-time self-defense seminar or maybe like an 8-week self-defense program, it's going to be hard to get that person to that place where
Yeah.
they're just, it's just habituated now. It's like, yeah, this is what we do, like I had to actually go to her and sit with her and tell her, like, it's cool. Like, he thinks it's awesome that you choked him out. You're new. Like,
Yeah.
that's cool. Like, we all are happy that you did that, but yeah, so a person in self-defense is going to be a harder or higher hurdle to clear for them.
I had a conversation a couple days ago with Andy Stump, and I know you just talked to him too. I haven't had a chance to
Yeah,
watch. He had a really good point because obviously he's had a lot of these conversations with veterans that have come back that have a lot of stuff to deal with. And
sure.
the thing that he said, which I hadn't fully considered, was he always just tries to bring them back to the information that they had at that moment, because the
Yeah,
vast majority of the time, these guys are feeling guilty over a situation after they've received all this other information about the circumstances that involved that action, when in reality, they had a fraction of a second to make a decision,
right.
and they didn't have all that information at the time.
Yeah,
And so he's like, well, let's talk about the right and wrong of what you did, but tell me the information you had available to you in that moment when you made that action, and then we'll talk about it, which I think makes a lot of sense.
yeah, and it's hard to get to that when you talk to guys because in the States, the media will take whatever happened and
Mhm.
just run with it. And they've got hours and hours to dissect every single second.
Mhm.
Like they can. I talked with a friend of mine after his incident, and I think his incident was start to finish less than 6 seconds. I mean, it was just almost 7 seconds, but start to finish, the time he got out of the car till it went down, less than 7 seconds. And if you look at how the media dissected it and how it was just talking points and all this other stuff, like, man, you would think he had like a year to think about it
Right.
before he made a decision. And so getting those guys to go back to, and they are altered in their perspective of or perception of what they knew at the time.
Mhm.
Like you have to actually go back, and it helps with our side, with the police side, is that I can go to the call log, I can go to the dispatch, and I can say, hey, this is what ComOps told you, man. This is what came up on your computer.
Right, guy with gun threatening people or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. This is what you knew when you got out of the car. Like you didn't know anything else. All this other stuff that you think you didn't know.
Mhm.
You've learned since then, and now it's kind of all glommed into the same thing, but you didn't know it then. And so you got to go on what you knew. Like
Mhm.
you knew this much, right? And now you think you know that much, but you
Right,
didn't. You
right.
really didn't. You only knew that what was on your computer screen, what came over the radio. Like we know because that stuff's all recorded. We can get a transcript and read it,
Mhm.
and that helps. To read that transcript and go, man, this is what they told you. This is what came out. Hey, he's actively fighting. He just put a gun to her head, just threw her down. He's stepping on her. He just kicked her in the face. Witnesses are saying, get here as fast as you can. Like all these things, like they're actively fighting. The comm ops are saying they're actively fighting. We can hear them in the background. We just heard a shot fired. Like, that's what you knew, man. Like what the media wants to come out with later, that's on them, but that's not what you knew. And that's not what you saw when you stepped out of the car or you stepped through the door. Like, but it's hard, man. It's hard to get that back once you come out of that situation and you've had a couple months before the trial or whatever it is, and you're getting bombarded
Mhm.
by people that might even be well-meaning that are like, hey man, did you ever think about this? Like, did you think about doing this? Or you know what I mean? Or hey, you know what came, we've just found out, man, it was an airsoft gun. Like, yeah, like, wait, what? And then you start thinking, your mind starts messing with you, like, man, did I see an orange tip? Did I see the muzzle? Like, did I know it was a BB gun? It starts messing with you because this information comes out later, and then our brain kind of just all scrambles it together because we're telling the supercomputer, find me an answer,
Yeah.
find an answer, and so it does. The brain does what you ask it to do, right? And it's hard, man. It's hard on guys that are in those situations to get them back to that moment. What did you know right then? You can't feel bad about all the other stuff that came out later. You can't allow that stuff to beat you down. It's almost like you wish you could isolate them.
Yeah.
But then that's counterproductive too. They need to kind of feel normal, kind of just be out and about and, you know.
Well, Paul, I have a lot of other stuff I want to talk to you about because I always enjoy talking to you, but I think that that's a perfect podcast for us here. And I really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah. Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Yeah. Let's do it again.
Yeah, let's definitely do it again.
I don't want to follow Andy though, man.
I think we'll have to fight with Andy at some point.
It's like, okay, fine. Batman was just here. Great. I'm the Green Lantern. Like, you want to talk to me after you talk to Batman?
Yeah.
So,
No, it's awesome. All right, brother.
Thank you, man. Take care.
Take care.